So now I'd like to talk a little bit about protective hopelessness. So this is something that I really think about when someone comes into my office and complains of being stuck or being in limbo. And they're really looking for something like motivation. They want my help at trying to figure out, how can I start acting again? How can I start doing something again? They'll have all these hopes and dreams and aspirations, but at the end of the day, they find themselves kind of being in a morass where like every day is the same and they just can't really get out of bed and do what they really want to do. They have all these ideas, but they can't bring themselves to do it. And inevitably, when I work with these people, what's underneath their inability to do stuff is what I call protective hopelessness. And if you kind of tunnel down, okay, why aren't you motivated? And they're like, well, there's no point. And if you get underneath there's no point, what you ultimately find is hopelessness. That there's really no point because nothing is going to succeed. And so then the question becomes, how do we help these people get unstuck? And as we uncover the hopelessness, they'll ask me, okay, how can I learn to hope again? And the first thing to do is to recognize that this problem that they face of hopelessness isn't actually a problem. It's actually a solution. Because the truth is that hopelessness is an impervious shield to rejection and failure, right? As long as I don't hope for anything, I won't try. And as long as I don't try for anything, I can't fail. And it's a really, really tricky thing because we think about hopelessness as something that paralyzes us. But the truth is that hopelessness is something that protects us. So if we really think about it, it may sound really bizarre, but like, okay, I don't want to be hopeless. I want to live my life filled with hope. And if I have hope, I can go out and do things. But in your mind and in your brain, that's really not the way that you're thinking about it. Because in your mind, this is what your mind sees. On the one hand, I can be hopeless. And if there's no point to anything, then I don't have to try. And if I don't try anything, then maybe I'll be a failure and maybe I won't be a failure. But if I actually go out on a limb, if I actually give it my all, then there's a real chance I could fail. And oftentimes when I deal with people who have this some-scot or protective hopelessness, what we find is some kind of really big failure in their past. Some point in their past where they really kind of went out on a limb and risked things like asking out their crush, or starting a new company, or really kind of like giving it their all to try out for a sports team, and then they get smashed, right? They gave it their all and it sort of fell short. And so their mind learns and sort of gives them a choice. Okay, we can either sit at home and be stuck in limbo, and then there's the possibility of failure in the future, or we can actually go out and try, and then the failure becomes real. And if I had to ask you, what would you choose? Hypothetical failure or real failure? And so this is the calculation that is in the mind of someone with protective hopelessness. That as long as they stay in limbo, they're actually going to be safe. And so these people will come into my office and will make this grand discovery. Your hopelessness is not a problem, it is a solution. Now that you know this, you can go out and you can live your life and it will be amazing. You will be fixed. Dr. K has fixed you. And so then they go out and they live their life and they give it their all. And then it gets even worse. So they come back and they get really, really confused and they said, I was prepared for failure. I realized that I need to be able to fail, man. I'm ready for it. I'm ready to fail. And then they go out and then what happens is even worse. They succeed. And the more they succeed, the worse it gets. And then they come back to my office and they get really confused and then I got really confused, but now I get it. Is that if you really think about succeeding, it's actually worse than failure if you've got this complex of protective hopelessness. Because these people oftentimes feel like they've fallen behind, right? So I had a guy who came into my office who had dropped out of college, was 25 years old, and wanted to go to medical school. And he was like, I really want to do it. He was afraid of failure and rejection, all that stuff. We worked through that stuff and he was feeling so much better. And then he was like, I'm going to finish college. And so it was so hard for him to apply to college. So he applied to college and then he got accepted to community college. And he went to 1 week of community college. And then he didn't go again. And he came into my office and I was like, what happened, man? It seemed like you were taking all the right steps. But what we discovered is that success actually hurts way more than failure. Because as long as he was kind of stuck in this limbo, he was one of these high IQ kids on the internet that was independently studying, Stoic philosophy and studying quantum mechanics on his own. And he was someone who was like lazy. He was born with this like undisciplined trait, right? So he was super smart, but he was unlucky. He was a tragic hero. He was someone who was lazy, but super smart. And alas, I am cursed. It's not my fault. But the second he succeeds, the second he actually like does something and moves his life forward, the second he enrolls in community college and goes for a week, right? So what happens is he feels so much worse because who is he now? He's a 25-year-old who's like a sophomore in a community college. Like, how can you possibly be proud of that? What is he gonna do, like post on his socials about, yeah, I started like, I'm taking chemistry 101 at the age of 25 in community college. And so the problem is that when we have this protective hopelessness, we kind of fall behind. And even as we succeed, we start to take away this safety blanket of like, oh, I'm lazy and I'm undisciplined and it's not my fault. Because if you actually give it your all and you start to make progress, you begin to realize how far you have to go. And so what we discovered when we kind of really tunneled down into this is when people with protective hopelessness start to take a step forward, when they actually start to succeed, their mind tells them something even more devastating, which keeps them even more stuck, which is that it's not enough, right? Every step you take forward isn't enough. So why bother? Just stay where you are. Just stay stuck. And this is the tricky thing because on the one hand, they're fighting against failure. And there's a hypothetical failure versus real failure. And so you have to muster up the courage to try and take a chance. And maybe it's gonna hurt so much more. Because can you guys imagine what it's like to be 25 years old, apply for community college and not even get in? So that's the first barrier that you have to overcome. And then even if you do succeed, then you get to the second barrier, which is actually succeeding. And then who are you? You feel pathetic. And so how do you overcome this? Because it's sort of like damned if you do and damned if you don't. And that's why protective hopelessness is so hard to deal with. That's why it plagues so many people right now. So how do you approach this, right? If you look at people with protective hopelessness, when they wake up in the morning, they know exactly what they should do, right? Intellectually, they have everything figured out. First, I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to do this. And so when they come into my office, what they tell me is, I know what I need to do. I just can't bring myself to do it. So if we tunnel down into what keeps us from engaging in behavior, we'll find that some things, it's basically an issue of punishment and reward. And this is where I may ask people, okay, how does it feel to do the right thing? And intellectually, what we'd say is that it feels good to do the right thing. But for people with protective hopelessness, what some of them find is that it's actually very painful to do the right thing. Because when I get up and I'm not in shape at all, and I do 2 or 3 push-ups, that doesn't actually feel like a triumph, right? What it feels like is terrible and pathetic. And when I start to take a step in the right direction, I know what I need to do. My mind actually tells me something else. My mind doesn't tell me, good job, bro, you did 2 push-ups today. Awesome, man. What my mind tells me is, look at how pathetic you are. This is never gonna be enough. Look at how high this mountain you need to climb is. Man, you should have started a year ago. You should have started 2 years ago. And so it's really bizarre, but when people with protective hopelessness wake up in the morning and they do the right thing, sometimes their mind actually punishes them for it and tells them that it's not enough. So where should you start? Start with awareness. Start by waking up in the morning and sort of saying to yourself, okay, let me try. What gets in the way? Is it failure? Is it the fear of failure? Is it this whole thing about if I don't do anything, sure, sort of hypothetically I could be a failure, but the actual failure hurts so much more? Is it choosing hypothetical failure over real failure? Or is it this issue with success, where even if you do the right thing, your mind starts to tell you it isn't enough? Because if that's the case, then what we need to learn how to do is respond to our mind in the right way. Once we know what it's doing, once we know where the trap is, we can avoid it. Because you can then understand that as you do the push-ups, you're gonna mentally prepare yourself. You're gonna see it coming, so it's not gonna catch you off guard. I'm gonna feel like this isn't enough, and I'm gonna do it anyway. Learn to act in spite of what your mind tells you, instead of being controlled by your mind. And then you'll take one step forward in overcoming protective hopelessness.
Olive, if you want to sit like this, we got to get that boot on your foot. Otherwise, you can sit cross-legged if you
Oh, let me put the boots on. Yeah. I'm feeling the boot. Keep that boot on your foot, boy.
Nice. You look great.
Tell me again.